This lecture is on moving from acceptable to optimal with brainstorming. So I'd like to introduce you to a word, satisficing. Satisficing is a word that comes to us from 20th century research on behavioral theory of the firm. This is from March and Simon, and it's a classic. Well, it's a classic book, but it includes a case study on decision making. What they have it's a firm that needs to find a new location for their warehouse, right? So they're looking around town. They've got geographical considerations, right? It can't be too far away from some of the other assets, properties. It has to be cheap and affordable. It has to be big enough, right? They're going around, they're looking around town. They find a warehouse that's good enough, that is satisfactory, and they stop looking. Now, that might sound like a reasonable thing to do. You find a solution that's good enough and you stop looking. But that is satisficing. Satisficing means accepting the first acceptable solution. However, as decision makers, when we have the time and resources, we want to optimize. Optimize means not finding the first acceptable solution, but finding the best possible solution. Okay, so this is what the process of brainstorming is all about. So, in the demo video next week, you'll see me introduce brainstorming as a process where we go through all of the topics for a dispute or negotiation, and we consider each topic individually. We brainstorm all of the ideas that a person has for that topic. We move on to the next topic, brainstorm all of the ideas they have. Only after we've brainstormed all of the possible ideas for all of the topics do we circle back around and start selecting them. So this is a strategy for moving people from satisficing to optimal. Because, and I see satisficing happen all the time. And sometimes it's appropriate. When I'm doing mediations in a court case where they have some kind of small claims, I do some landlord tenant disputes, people are going to get evicted. They have maybe 45 minutes and they really need to reach an agreement because otherwise, you know, something bad is going to happen. That's a case where I'm not pushing people too far. Once they find something that's satisfactory, we're writing it up and getting them back out there before they get hit by some part of the legal process. So satisficing is introduced as a heuristic in the sense that it's a departure from rationality. Because remember, our definition of rationality is maximizing expected payoff, but it can sometimes be rational when taking too much time is costly. But the most important lesson here is just to be aware of what you're doing. If you are satisficing, do it because it's the rational thing to do for your context. Don't satisfice because it's easy, because brainstorming is hard. So, okay, some strategies for how you can do this and some general rules of thumb for how you can optimize. The basic idea, as I mentioned, is to separate the solution generation from the solution evaluation. And then you can circle back to selecting. You can always keep generating ideas throughout this process. And then an important thing to do is when people have exhausted their ideas, when they say, I can't come up with any more ideas, push them to come up with yet more. Ask them open-ended questions. Use their needs and interests. Ask them, if you were to, pick one of these solutions, would this stop you from feeling whatever negative thing you were feeling about the problem, anxious, worried, right? Inevitably, when people come up with one page of solutions, after we push them, they come up with two. If they come up with 2 pages very easily, we push them and they come up with four. And typically, in these longer form mediations, when we really have time to explore the space, the solutions people tend to agree on, the ones that actually solve their problem, they tend to come from those later 2 pages. The first pages are the obvious, easy stuff. The hard stuff to find are the later pages. That's where we optimize, that's where we find those integrative solutions. Okay, so I just want to close by acknowledging you'll probably resist this. People will resist this. If you come in and say, look, we're going to spend 2 hours thinking this decision through really carefully, they're going to get to a solution and say, hey, we found a solution. Can we stop now? Right? But you need to ask yourself, are you an optimizer or are you a satisficer? And you need to ask yourself, how important is this decision? If the decision is important to you and you have the resources, give it the time it deserves. And this concludes the lecture, moving from acceptable to optimal with brainstorming.